stand?
The Lord's our rock, in him we hide, a shelter in the time of storm. Secure whatever may betide, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cool and shade on the burning sun, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm. A shade by day, defense by night, a shelter in the time of storm. No fears alarm, no foes affright, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cool and shade on the burning sun, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm. The raging floods may round us beat, a shelter in the time of storm. We find in God a safe retreat, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cool and shade on the burning sun, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm. O rock divine, O refuge dear, a shelter in the time of storm. Be thou our helper ever near, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cool and shade on the burning sun, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm.
Amen.
Good afternoon, believers. I hope you are sheltering because the time of storm is now. The storms are letting loose right now. And I hope that we really have shelter. Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for the privilege of prayer. We ask you, dear Lord, that you will continue to cause us to behold Christ and be transformed into his likeness. We thank you for the wonderful gift, the exchange that you have done on our behalf, making your Son sin for us who knew no sin, that we who knew no righteousness could be made a righteousness in him. And we thank you in your wonderful name. Amen. All right, this evening, we're looking at the subject that most of us, well, some of us have heard about a lot of it, but I've tied it in with what I've been doing quite recently, and I titled it this evening, The Grand Conspiracy and Agenda 2030. I'm sure you all hear about this Agenda 2030. And, of course, there's a lot of conspiracy going on about it. And there's a lot of truth about it. Even though the people who are involved in it will claim it's conspiracy to some extent, there has a lot of truth in it that we need to be aware of, that we must escape the trap that is set. First of all, the conspiracy. What were the conspiracy? And I consulted the dictionary for that. It's interesting. It's a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. You hear that? It's a secret plan. And therefore, I am looking at it from the great secret plan. So having done something unlawful already, and that is harming the entire planet, but he is behind it all and is not being seen to be the problem. That is the enemy of our souls. So we're looking at the 2030 agenda for those who have known somewhat about it. Of course, they're involved in climate issues and so on. We're going to explore a little bit. We're not going to get through this evening, but I'm giving an overview on how it feeds into the narrative of this great conspiracy. All right. Okay. Now, the first slide here speaks of the mastermind behind it all. There's a mastermind behind this conspiracy and the 2030 agenda. And many of the people who are involved in the 2030 agenda, a matter of fact, I say many of them, the leaders of the nations of this world are not necessarily aware of this real conspiracy, not just a regular conspiracy, it's a grand one, a big one, for a particular end. And I quote Ezekiel 28:3 to start with, to introduce us to him who is really the mastermind behind all of this. And note what is said of him here in Ezekiel 28:3. Behold, you are wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that can be hidden from you. Now, who could that be? Who could that be? But the great grand conspirator. And I read a statement here from Review and Herald of December 1, 1891, paragraph 6, which says, the mastermind in the confederacy of evil is ever at work to keep the truth out of sight and to bring into full view the opinions of great men. And that's exactly what's happening with this 2030 agenda, or Agenda 2030 as it's more regularly called. So there's a confederacy, a conspiracy of evil. And therefore then, truth is being or tried to be kept out of sight, like she says here. You might be saying that she's just talking about what you call Bible truth. But the other truths, than Bible truths as well, you know. And the enemy is therefore then working I call it very nefariously through men who sometimes we trust. And some of us, not being sure, like to vote for these people who have already gone with plans to do certain things. So we need to be aware and be honest and frank with you as I seek to be. Now, the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development is a United Nations paper, a plan for what they call sustainability in the earth. But you have a lot of common sense here, and you who are listening online, you could tell me if you are seeing any sustainability occurring in this world. What is being sustained right now? Well, nothing's being sustained. There's a spiral downward. Listen to this. And these are some points I pulled from the UN Sustainable Development paper, as you say, from the UN paper on sustainable development. You know, you might be thinking that this is irrelevant, has no place in teaching in church, but I want you to hold your breath a little while And you might be shocked to see, in actual fact, some things that you should be aware of that we are not yet aware of as we ought to be. First of all, this agenda was set in 2015, replacing the Millennial Development Goals, because the Millennial Development Goals, of course, were to finish in 2000, but they did not fulfill the role that they were supposed to do. And there are a whole lot of them. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And some of the leaders are saying that, well, it doesn't even seem as if they will be accomplished by 2030. But that's a different story. Now, the objective, I didn't say objectives, the objective of the Millennium Development Goals is for the transformation of the world. How does that sound to you? I know one transformation that is supposed to take place. Be transformed how? By the renewing of the mind. But this transformation is a transformation of the climate, ecology, and all of those other systems in the world. So begin to listen carefully. They say it will be achieved by a plan of action. Note this third bullet. A plan of action for the people, for the planet, and for prosperity. I want you to think for the people. What kind of plan of action is helpful to the majority of people in the world? And then for our planet, you should be aware of something that I'm going to come to shortly. And then for prosperity, I'm told that over the COVID period, more millionaires and billionaires have been formed, quote unquote, than ever before. More people have gained more money than they ever had before, during COVID. And this is supposed, in actual fact, a plan for prosperity, but of whom? The question is, who are the ones that are prospering? You just go on the internet and find out that men have made a couple of billions of dollars during COVID. The actual height of COVID, people were really making money. And lots of millionaires began to flourish. But they just become millionaires suddenly. Prosperity. And then, this last bullet I put 1 Timothy 3:5-3, Thessalonians 5:3 by. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace and larger freedom. Universal peace. There's more trouble in the world now than ever before. And the millennial goals are supposed to bring a kind of peace to the world. Look around. And the White House has a statement that says that the trade unions are going to cause a lot of difficulties in this world coming to the end. Are you aware of that statement? Anybody aware of that statement? I've heard it before. Right now in the world, I am told there's so much protests going on, isn't funny. The National Health Service in England, over in France, over in the United States, over in, of course, Iran, you hear about those protests. You go over the African nation, there's so many protests going on. Because people feel as if they are caged in. They don't have their freedom. But these goals are saying you will strengthen universal peace. And that word should not lose us. You know, the Apostle Paul there in 1 Thessalonians 5:3 says, when they cry what? Peace and safety, what happens? Bigger trouble. And let me tell you something. President Macron of France is up in China trying to broker some kind of thing and got their fire on his feet at home in France. Trying to solve a problem between, well, Russia and China, with the United States. And he has so much trouble trying to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. So there's no real peace. That is good language on paper. But in essence, It ain't working. But let's go. Now, listen to the players behind the agenda, the 2030 agenda. Listen who they are. And they're right here in our setting. We, the heads of state and government, and high representatives. Now, some of the high representatives are not elected by anybody, by any country, but they have been given responsibility. But it says, we, the head of state and government, and high representatives, meeting at the United Nations headquarters in New York from the 25th to the 27th of September 2015, note that date, as the organization celebrates its 70th anniversary, have decided today, on that date, on a new global sustainable development goals, so that your country leadership and all 193 countries in the world have signed on to these millennial goals. Everyone. So that Barbados is a signatory, like all the other 193 countries in the world, signatories to this thing called the Millennial Development Goals that is supposed to reach fruition in the year 2030. But why 2030 is very interesting. Now, listen to the vision first, set by the United Nations for these 2030 goals, the 2030 agenda. 1, a world free of poverty, hunger, disease, and want. What do you think about that first? What do you think about that? Is it probable? Is it possible? As Christians, we really think. You know, Christ said in John 12:8, you will always have the poor with you. And you know full well, when you look around the world, poverty is really increasing. You know, the divide has occurred even greater over the same COVID period. The poor have become even much poorer, while the rich have become richer. But this was a 2015 goals. And we're going to discover something that's happening in 2015 too that you might not be aware of, and I want to make the connection, there's a nexus between it. And they also say in this vision, all life can thrive. That word thrive is a good word, you know. Thrive don't mean just merely existing, you know. It means in actual fact that you're able to really do well. That the concept of thriving, not just barely getting head above the water. Then you have a world free of what? Look at this, the third one. What is a world free of what, brethren? Wow. There is no difference between number 1 and number 3 when it comes to reality. We were just in St. Lucia, and before that you heard of what was happening down before in St. Lucia. But when we were up north, we still heard pa, 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 pa. Well, you know, I told Merton, boy, we are really country boys in truth. When we go into Greaves is a whole new place, even though I've gone to it so often. The dynamics in a city is different from what happens even in our country setting, even though there's not much country in Barbados. And then the last one says, a world with universal literacy. What is literacy, brethren? The capacity to read and write. Let's put it mildly. You know, even in our country, it's alleged that we have a 98% literacy rate, but that's a joke. Some people can't even recognize their name if you write it on a billboard. No, I'm serious. Sometimes I have to question, what is wrong with the educational system? But of course, the problem is not necessarily only the educational system. There's a lot more involved in why people are illiterate. And as a result of illiteracy, what do you find? Crime escalating. Because many people, of course, not only illiterates commit crime. You don't want to give that impression. Some so-called intelligent, degreed men are very serious criminals. But what I'm saying is, people down the ladder realize that they have been marginalized and they have to do something to get things going in their direction. And therefore, they push the drugs. And the drugs bring fast money, but quick death at the same time too. So that really, all these things are good ideas. And that's all there are on paper. The next one is a world with equitable universal access to quality education at all levels to health. Let me know, brethren, that if you don't got a piece of money in this place, health is like a mirage to you. You may have to wait for a couple of years in order to get a vision test or some kind of test, especially at our hospital. They're so crowded, and of course, they aren't able to. So that when these people get in there, ivory tower talking, it does sound really good when you listen to them, because I had the privilege of interacting to some extent at a certain level. But when you step back and look, you realize that you see these things ain't really worth what the people are written on. Really, the truth. Harsh it might sound. Then the other goal is care and social protection, where physical, mental, and social well-being are assured. You hear the kind of words they're using? Assured. Now, mental health has gone off the charts these days, we are told, especially during COVID. We are told that there's more mental illness now than even ever before. People are just out of whack at the mental level, and many of them are committing suicide. But here, the United Nations Development Goals really sound nice. I'm not beating them down. I'm trying to look at the reality of what is happening on the ground. There are people around us who are suffering serious mental issues. And we might not be aware, but just take a little time just to, if you get inquisitive enough, you'll find out people are not coping. In the everyday life, a lot of people are not coping, you know. You talk, well, I know, for example, I speak with people, and they are so frustrated, they don't know where to turn or what to do. And sometimes you yourself don't know even what to tell them in many instances. So that the Sustainable Development Goals with a 2030 so-called deadline seem not to be working, but we're going to see how it impacts on us here. Now, I have here the MSG, the MDGs, the SDGs, and Agenda 30. That is what was first the Millennial Development Goals. Now they turn to the Sustainable Development Goals associated with Agenda 2030. We're going to get to there just now. But I just want to set a little framework, as it were. And my questions, I asked 3 questions here that I propose to answer as I go on in. 1, are these goals part of the grand conspiracy to bring in a one world government? What do you think about that? 2, what do they portend for the world that we're living in presently? And thirdly, this question, as Christians, should we be part of these goals? I would like a response to that. They are good goals on paper. Should we be part of them and help it to bring them in, to help people get over poverty, to help people become literate? Shouldn't we be involved in those kind of things, brethren? Do you think that we have a responsibility to help in those kind of things? You don't seem to be aware or seem to know. All right. I will therefore then say something here that might seem to contradict. Well, there are questions, so it can be a contradiction. Yes, Brother Saul. Your mic need to be put on, brothers, or Brother Saul need to put your mic on. All right. Brother Saul is challenged here to get your mic on. His son is going to help him. So Brother Saul is almost adamant that the answer is yes. All right, as Brother Saul comes and speaks, you who are in the listening over the internet as well, I want you to be thinking, even if you can send a message to the church about your thoughts. Right, go ahead, Brother Saul.
Yeah, I would say yes, but use it as a means of pointing the gospel to people.
Okay.
Or leading people to the gospel.
All right, very good. That is what welfare ministry is to be about as well as the health message. Welfare ministry is to be entering wedge, helping people get food, get clothing, etc., that you can, at said time, show them the way to Christ. Okay. Now, seems to have touched something I didn't want to. Good. My next slide say here, no joining. No joining of them. What they say we can do, but we're not to join with them. Listen to this statement you have from the Spirit of Prophecy. I left her, remember? I left me now. Anyway, she says, and I'm applying it now here to what we're discussing. The leaders of the Sunday movement, she's speaking of the Sunday movement, but the application can be made, may campaign for reforms that people need. Can't dismiss that. Principles in harmony with the Bible. And I think some of those principles are in harmony with the Bible, but listen to her. But while they combine these with a requirement contrary to God's law, his servants cannot join with them. Nothing can justify setting aside the commandments of God for human laws. You see, a lot of these things are being spoken very nicely, but understand what the undercurrents are, and understanding that you cannot join with those groups. You can use the things they're talking about, but not join with them. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying there. Okay. Now, I have this word and ask the question, conspiracies. We hear a lot about conspiracy theories of all sorts these days, especially over the last 5-6 years. A lot of conspiratorial talk. But listen carefully. And my question again is Agenda 2030 and the global reset another name for the New World Order? Anybody have heard of the global reset? The World Economic Forum that is annually convened in Davos and led by Mr. Strauss. Hello? Yeah, it was rubbish to fool who could fool. So why are you going every year to this particular place and you don't allow people to come and understand what's going on? Rubbish. So what we're saying, what I'm asking is, this 2030 agenda, is it part of this great, what we call the global reset? And remember, it is not something that everybody is in on. You must be of a certain stature and standing to be part of this. So the question is it really rubbish in that case? All right. Then the question is, what is the role of WEF, as it's called, in Agenda 2030? What is their role? And then the World Economic Forum helps leaders from all walks of life to prepare for exponentially disruptive change. You see that statement? That is charge. To be prepared for exponentially disruptive change. So what kind of change could that be that is referred to exponential and not just multiplicative, but it is the way it functions as exponential, it is like 10 times every time down the road and not just 2 by 2 and whatever. What are they preparing for? Is it something that you have been made aware of but might be neglecting? The exponential change, brethren, is it only on climate change issues that you're dealing with? Is it only on the political sphere that we have to contend with? What are these, or is this exponential change? I want to suggest to you that the 2030 agenda undermines our prophetic teachings. And this is where I want us now to zero in very carefully. And my question is there any relationship between the prophecy relative to the United States of America and Agenda 2030? You know what is the prophecy concerning the United States, right? You know the role that they will play in end-time issues and bring about the mark of the beast, the image of the beast first, and then the mark of the beast. But 2030 agenda is looking for sustainability in our world, and it does not include what our prophetic issues are dealing with. So that's why I ask the question, what's the relationship? Is there a relationship? Yes, there's a big relationship. Where we go? What are the roles of the papacy in Agenda 2030? Do they have anything to do with this Agenda 2030? You see, therefore, then it is of more importance sometimes than we think. Because as you begin to look at these things, you realize it has nothing at all to do about what the Word of God says is coming down the pipe. No, nothing whatever. And my question is, why do you think the year 2030 was chosen? Was it only chosen because they didn't get through the Millennium Development Goals and so well, let's push it to 2030? Or is there something else behind it? And my question is, does it have anything to do with the image and the mark of the beast? Does it? Listen carefully. You've heard of Laudato Si. Everybody heard of that Laudato Si, right? The Pope Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical. You never heard about that? Man, you guys making sport, man. Sorry. Man, that's the big climate change issue, the ecology of the earth. Nobody heard about that there, brethren? That thing has been postulated since 2015, just like the the Sustainable Development Goals the same year, dovetailing with that. And Laudato Si is what we call the encyclical, a letter or a document that the Pope crafted. Well, not himself necessarily, but it is under his jurisdiction for the purpose of taking care of Mother Earth. You know what I just said? And listen to something here. Laudato Si, that's the Latin, means praise be to you. To you who? To you who? Mother Earth. Is the second encyclical of Pope Francis. The encyclical has the subtitle on care for our common home. That is being pushed. I'll show her it's being pushed. In it, the Pope critiques consumerism and irresponsible development. He laments environmental degradation and global warming and calls on all people of the world to take swift and unified global action. How does that not sound like the Sustainable Development Goals? I know something? In the same year 2015 that the Sustainable Development Goals were put out there, this encyclical was also put out there as well. And I ask the question, is it merely coincidence? What do you think? Mere coincidence? The papacy pushing the care of the earth, the care of our Mother Earth. For those who will know a little bit about the climate issues and so on, there's a term called GHIA, it refers to the same thing called Mother Earth. And you will see, for example, from time to time, for those I don't know about, I do a lot of inquisitive work on the internet, behind the papacy, behind Adventism, and seeing what is going on. You will notice from time to time that there is some celebrations, even including Adventists. And you have the indigenous religions, projecting their care of the earth and tying with the papacy, and Adventists find themselves tied up with it. Especially, there was one recently in the South American continent, I think it was Peru or one of those countries, where there were actually, it was a worship of a false god, basically, to put it strongly and straightly, where, the people were looking at their ancestors. And these people like to talk about the ancestors and how they have to pray to the spirits of their ancestors. Yeah, that is a real, I hope you all are aware of these things. That is a real movement going on. Praying to the ancestors, you will call it a certain name, but this is what really is happening. So that what I'm saying to you, this encyclical by the Pope, lambasts consumerism and attacks, of course, the economists who like to talk about our system of operating, where money making is the end and objective. So the Pope is attacking that, and you will see it's a good thing, but don't join with him to do that. He's also looking at environmental degradation, complaining about how the earth is being treated, how we are handling the earth resources. As a result, the earth is, according to them, rebelling. The earthquakes, the floods, the storms and hurricanes, they say, is a rebellion of the earth because of how it is treated. What do you think about that? The rebellion of the earth because of how it is treated? It sounds nice. But why are there earthquakes and storms and hurricanes? Is it because the earth is rebelling? Is that the real bottom line of it? All right. And like I said, he says that you need to take swift and unified global action. I want you to pause there a minute. You hear what kind of action is being called for? Swift and unified. What resonates in your mind when you hear about unified action? This is to bring the entire world together. That's your objective. To get us as one. In the United Nations, there's a religion, what you call a world religion issue in which they're seeking to get all the world religions together. And we cannot be part of that and yet maintain our singleness to God. So what I'm saying to you, these things are not just, fly-by-night things, but they're feeding into a particular narrative. And this point I mentioned here, unified global action. And I'm going to show you how many people, especially of the Catholics, young people, have dedicated their life to this particular matter. And it'd be good if we make ourselves au fait, not that we need to be able to, preach on these things, but I'm just trying to alert you, brethren, in my estimation, how late we are in the whole scheme of things. With these things happening, it is suggesting to us the powers of this earth are working overtime to get their agenda fixed. And therefore, they need to have that global, that unified global action. We need it. They need it. Okay. All right, a little further. So, Laudato Si. It teaches us to discover the worth of each thing. The worth of humanity is more than can be envisioned. But Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical letter, teaches us to discover the worth of each thing. And I emphasize the word each thing. To be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly, listen now, we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey toward what? As we journey toward what, brethren? Your infinite light. These words should not be missed. Whose infinite light we are journeying towards is the question. Christ is the light of the world and has come and brought light. But this thing is saying, as we journey towards your infinite light. Remember, this is set in the scheme of the world being your mother. The world being the mother. And that's why you have to take care of her very carefully. I'm not saying that the earth or the planet or the ecological system should be just, God's people should be most careful in everything. But when you begin to defy and try to have a unified situation, it is making a statement. Now, I refer to the LSM here, the Laudato Si movement. Listen carefully, is a global network of over 900 Catholic organizations and over 10,000 trained grassroots leaders known as Laudato Si animators. You think that this thing is small, right? I believe that when we get struck with it, we might be shocked. Down in South America, particularly, you know, which is very Catholic, they have an array, a plethora of these animators teaching grassroots issues about Mother Earth and, of course, the Pope's encyclical. Now, this movement is inspired by the Pope's Laudato Si. And the stated mission is inspire and mobilize the Catholic community to care for our common home and achieve climate and ecological justice. Hear those kind of words again. Climate justice. Now, many of you would have heard of Greta Thunberg, that young lady who was involved in pushing, you know, when it was the climate conference, the last one, the one before especially, who would have left her home up in the Dutch region using a boat that is not powered by any type of motorization so that she would not be involved in creating greenhouse gases. And the objective is we have to care for the earth. But notice that it's being defied. The earth is now a god to many people. And therefore, if you do things disruptive to the earth, you can be held chargeable and brought to justice in many places. Now, let's get home here now because I've been saying things that might have been over your head in other places. You think when government talk about planting trees, that is just for planting trees' sake? That is part of the initiative so that people are offering money to plant trees to protect the environment, they say. But our government, not necessarily this particular party, but they are still part of it, but they have signed on to it in previous years with the other administration. So they are still part of it because they have not reneged or come out of the whole situation. So what I'm saying is, all the governments of the world are looking at this thing very seriously. Climate justice and ecological justice. You cannot afford to interfere with the ecology of the earth and that more so of the climate. And of course, you know that we have, of course, you know, we talk a lot about climate change, and I was one who was pushing the idea that climate change is real, which I say believe it is real, but the thing behind it now is the frightening aspect of it, because it's now being used as a ploy to get the world together. And we know that when we see that coming together, brethren, we should be very wary of where we are in the scheme of things. And since it is being pushed, especially by young people, you know how that will be. But there's some more for me just say to you. Lots of us have heard about smart cities. Who haven't heard about smart cities around here? Yeah. And you have heard many people talking about you are now going to be not able to travel more than 15 miles out of your place, or else you might have to pay a fine and all kinds of these things. And they're saying that is false too, Brother Steve. But in England, it is already operational, from what I gather. Imagine that. That now I live in St. Lucie, so I can't even go to Christ Church because more than the 50-mile limit that I will be given. And therefore, then there are some other issues that I will try to point out. It says here it's purported that by 2050, at least 60% of the world population will be living in cities. 60% in cities? Well, they got to be living like rats in a barrel. Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Mumbai over in India. They have so many millions, Los Angeles, New York, so many millions of people confined. And people are finding it difficult to sustain themselves. That is why governments now are becoming, of course, more and more, they're becoming more and more like a mendicant society. Everybody depending upon government for a handout. And that is exactly what the objective is. Get them into government's hand, and they'll be able to move and push them as they really like. So by 2050, if 60% of the world's population will be living in cities, you can imagine what will be happening. And we're going to show something just now. And the idea of smart cities sound real smart and look smart too. Just like your smart TV, your smart watch, your smart phone. Everything's smart nowadays. But it portends to danger, brethren. It portends to danger. And as God's people, we need to be aware. We need just to be aware in actual fact that, you know what? Things are not what they seem, you know. And some of us seem to think that we got a long time down here because things are being made smart. Eventually, we might be outsmart. That's how you understand it. Now, these smart cities are defined as smart both in the ways in which their governments harness technology, as well as how they, listen to these words now, how they monitor, analyze, plan, and govern the city. Monitoring. Now, you know, we've had some talk here in our country about those monitors along the highways. Over in Bagatelle, we have one over in Spikestown and over other parts of Barbados, where now also you're being given the highway as well too. You're being given something that can track you, a device onto your windscreen, so that they can really, whatever is going on, they can know. And I tell you, brethren, they already know, you know. You think that the new ID card is just a new ID card for ID card's sake? We're going to get to that just now. I am speaking false. All right. Well, you could take up yours and see what happens. Well, if you don't get them by just now, you will be not getting paid by government. Be careful. All right. Now, what I'm saying is they want to harness the technology as well as how they monitor. You hear that word? Monitor, and analyze, and plan, and govern the cities. Now, if 60% of the people will live in the cities, and government is monitoring, analyzing, planning, and governing the cities, what is going to issue? Get into the country. You know that statement by God's servant? Get out into the country. She was speaking, no doubt, of the larger nations. Because Barbados is not a real country, to be honest and frank with you. So what I'm saying is, you're crowded, people are being crowded into cities. Easy to be monitored. Very easy. And if you're smart, or they call it, easier to be monitored. And therefore, government can do certain things. And we're going to look a little bit at digital ID just now, Brother Steve. And we will see that the reality is every transaction you're going to make gets back into the central bank digital system, CDBS, I can't have some fancy acronym it has. Now it means therefore then that people will be easy to be controlled. You know, I've gone to New York a couple of times, other countries too, but New York is a classic example. For those who've gone to New York, you know, to get over New York in a crisis is an impossibility. Why you say that? Do you know the roadways to get out of New York? You have the Holland Tunnel, which is easily monitored. And wherever other places you go to get out in New York, at least the city I'm talking about, you have to make your way down there. You can't go back to go to New Jersey, for example, that's coming in. So what I'm saying, if people are being forced into cities, brethren, don't you see the move is really afoot to be able to control, to be able to take charge of your life? But yet, lots of our people and lots of us love the Big Apple, love the large cities, the Miamis and the Los Angeles and those places. And I like what A.T. Jones said in one of his works. The time will come that we have to get out of the United States. And he was American speaking back in the 19th century. But still people are crowding, and you see people fighting to get the United States, dying to get the United States, and those so-called first world countries. But brethren, the time is virtually at hand when people will wish that they never had gone to those places to live. Because of the controls that will be implemented, the limits that will be implemented for these smart cities, and the use of the digital currencies. You know, I have a little slide there on that matter, showing that the poor, the illiterate, and those people are going to be in real trouble with these digital currencies and these digital issues coming on stream. They're not going to be able to trade in dollars like we would do now and go $100 and whatever. No, you must have it, as it were, like they say, in a digital wallet, so that it is now only dealt with over internet, and that makes it easier to track you. And you're going to be given a certain limit, and many circles claim, and if you go outside your limit, your money will be cut. Do you see, brethren, that in my estimation, that seems to be exactly what God has been warning us about in this end time issue. The buy and sell decree of what I'm talking about. Because if you have to depend on a digital currency and you cannot go of your city or certain limits outside your city, do you see that you are at the mercy of these governments? Don't you see why God's people are warned and told, get out of the cities? I want to bring that in here directly. That's why you're warned. So God saw all of that, and he made provision for us by giving us those messages. So let's go a little further. Now, I don't know if you can see this very well. That's an illustration of a smart city. Look really nice. Everything is in place. You will have, therefore, then, lanes for bicycles and pedestrians, which is already in some cities. You will have, of course, no gas guzzling or no polluting vehicles. They're all electric and chargeable areas. That's your objective. Why do you think they're pushing even off of hydrogen to motor or to power your vehicles? Because they don't want to see any exhaust. because exhaust affects or impact the atmosphere with the greenhouse gases. So everyone wants to be clean. Of course, we started in Barbados too. Last administration ordered some electric buses, and this administration enjoying the electric buses. I enjoy driving them too. They're very smooth and soft, but it is what is behind them of what they speak. So I'm saying to us, brethren, we are not to be as comfortable as many of us seem to think. Things are faster and further on than we are understanding. Very, very far on, you know. And you know, we talk about the generation and the watches. We talk a lot about 2024 being the midpoint of this generation, which could be the last generation as far as we are concerned. It means, therefore, that if that is true, brethren, the enemy must have already got his movements in operation. He's not just sitting back and guessing and saying what you're going to do. He has plans afoot in order to trap us so that we cannot escape. And therefore, that is why people are being crowded into the cities in a smart way. Because the easiest way to control people is in a confined space. If you left me to run and go to St. Lucie, you can't catch me. But if you got me in Bridgetown, where you got all the fellas, the security forces surrounding you, you know where you go. Got your pass to go certain places. You might have to have the same ID too to get away. I'm not saying that is what it is right now, but I can see, according to what little I understand, that is not too far-fetched. Then, somebody asking something? The towers? Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a city, of course. Then this thing I want to just alert you about. Let me have come back next time to do some other issues. The digital IDs. The digital IDs. You have what we now call the digital footprints. And you have active or passive digital or traceable activities. And this is very interesting. You know, if you take out, you know that's why some people don't like to use their credit card and those cards. Because if I give you $5,000, you can't trace who that come from. Can't trace it. But you see the digital IDs? Let me tell you something, they got it down pat at T. You can't do any business on this planet nowadays. Matter of fact, there are some cities already. Seoul in South Korea is one of the leading cities where cash is not anything that is known to anybody. And there are certain states, certain cities in the United States where you don't bring the cash. Cash is outdated. You got to bring a digital work. That is a credit card, preferably. Why is that? The ability to track your every movement is there. And that's why the cell phone, too, just to bring this thought, that's why cell phones expose many people. Because there are towers all over, and you must be in contact with a tower in order to be able to use a cell phone. So you see, brethren, everything is virtually on stream already, and on some of us that know the proverbial crowd pour inside the water being warmed up. Think that everything is all right. We need, why you might say, well, Brother Greaves, you're not preaching the gospel as you want it to be preached. I am hoping that I'm making us aware, brethren, that we are not as comfortable as we think. Things are not as cool as we will want to believe. And of course, this digital footprint has some traceable activities, like I said here. There's a passive one where your data trail individual is involuntarily left online. You know, sometimes you go online and you forget to close down, for example, your computer or log off. Not that doing that won't tell the people who you are, but sometimes you can expose your information unduly and unnecessarily. And that is why, you have this thing called a cell phone and WhatsApp. They claim that your messages are encrypted. That's a joke. And that's why I've been saying on many occasions to some of our brethren, be very careful what you put on the internet. Because I believe it can come out to haunt us someday. I believe that. It can be used for good purpose. Don't what I'm saying. But be very careful what you're transmitting out there. Because if you are caught transmitting things that seem to be what we call conspiracy, you might be tracked. But more than that, then there's the active footprint, where people deliberately left data trail online. And we can get a little further to that one. And then you have what we call the tracking cookies. Every now and again you open it, you see a cookie, you either accept the cookie or it can't get on the site. But there are different types of cookies. But I just want to deal with this particular tracking cookie because I found out this was the most significant in my estimation. And it's used for marketers and others to know your preferences. Why do you think you log on to something and suddenly you were dealing with a particular matter and you see a lot of information coming on that same thing? It's because these people realize that you're logging on, looking at certain things, and they're throwing information for you to choose what they have for you to look at. And that's what I'm saying to us, sometimes we're not as wise as we ought to be. We say, how do you know I want that? How do you know? To watch your habit and pattern on the internet. And as a result, they watch you and throw things at you, and you bite. And the more you do that, the more they throw things at you. But Steve has a question.
Really a question. It's not really a question, but a comment.
Yeah.
I noticed, like I'm a person who's on eBay.
Yeah.
Or different buying sites
Yeah.
to go and buy things and such like. You know that you may go and just watch things. You have an interest in it, but you don't buy anything. It can pop up in your email.
Of course.
And tell you, well, we have this on sale. And you say, well, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was looking at that. Like, I wanted a bike, and I wanted a carbon bike rather than, a steel bicycle. And from then on till now, every now and then, your favorite picks for the week, and I got him bicycles. I did not go and bid on any. I did not ask to buy any, but because I have been watching them, somehow cookies have attached onto my computer to tell me, well, when bikes are cheap or when bikes are available. So everything you do comes up. If I'm looking at cars, they start to offer me car parts, and I didn't go on the car park site looking for anything, so they knew.
Yeah, you see, and that is the marketing strategy that they use. Once you get onto those sites, don't think that you're just here by yourself. You are being watched, We are being watched. And therefore, because you're being watched, I can send something to you and see what you would do as well. And that is a very mundane thing, Brother Steve just referred to buying things. But there are other issues involved. And that's how, for example, some people can lose money. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about that some other time, but how people can lose money very easily by certain mistakes they make. I say here that brings me to Revelation 13:17 issue, the buy and sell decree, and the cashless society. Are you ready for the cashless society, brethren? Ready or not, it is coming. Really, no cash, just your card for you to do business. It might not happen in 2023, but 2024 might not pass. I'm not saying it will happen then. But just let us understand that things are not what they seem, brethren. And we need to keep that focus relative to our own spirituality. So that when Revelation 13:17 talks about not being able to buy or sell, except you have something. There's something that you will have to have as well in order to be able to get food for your children. To be able to buy your clothing. You know, we don't look at it that way. You know, you just think about running and hiding. But before you run and hide, all this can be implemented. Before you get to run and hide. All right. Even making a small little statement there. Let's look at the cashless society. Yes, Mike, brother Mike, cause others. Yeah. I'd say about 6, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, come right, Mike, come to the mic, man. Well, you see, my cutoff point is 6 o'clock, and I'm watching that at 6 o'clock, brother Mike.
Going back to the papacy and his agenda.
That's the last one, brother Mike.
Pardon?
That's the last slide I had there.
No, you don't have to go back to it. I'm
okay.
just making reference to
What happened there?
what the Pope is educating his young
People
about, right? In terms of climate change and all that sort of thing. And we don't know that the papacy, just as we are studying in this matter of the crisis, in terms of knowledge of what God says will happen,
Oh, yeah.
the Pope is ahead of we in many things, you know. And things like climate change, putting up that the earth is like a god and we gotta reverence it and dignify it, you know. He is preparing for the time when the crisis hits.
Oh, yeah.
And people like you and I ain't going his way in terms of following him with the false Sabbath. Where Sister White say that they're going to blame all these ills of society for these people.
Correct.
So he is preparing the way and sensitizing the whole world that, look, this thing is here, very good, and we need it. And we ain't saying that we ain't need it. But when it starts to fall apart, because America with the Pope have pushed their agenda for SU to control people, and we're not going for it, well, then you can see how you become a part of the world universal execration.
Yep.
You would see how people will hate you for nothing.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see, they had a different spirit to you.
All right, then. So it is important in these times that we look through the agenda and see past the Pope. He is ahead of a lot of it. They tell me that Castro knew the 2300-day prophecy backward, and when Seventh-day Adventists were called before him and he questioned them about the prophecy, Castro had it in his head and he knew what was going down. So a lot of these fellas that are big up in societies,
Oh, yeah.
they are following the prophecies and trying to counter it because the devil is behind them in the selfishness.
Thank you. And that's why you had it there, who is behind it all. You know, Duggan like to say or used to, well, still now, that when we are brought before these lawyers, they're going to know our doctrines better than us. And if you don't know them, you can't spell. And you know, lots of us still think that there's a lot of time. And that's one, well, personally, that's one of the things that I am very concerned about. There's not as much time as we think, you know. If what is happening in the Church of God, first of all, and then, of course, the corresponding issues outside, because there's a tandem operation. God's people being ripened for the harvest, and then Satan people being ripened as well for another harvest, but the harvest of the treading of the grapes. All right, as I go on then, I say we should fear a cashless society. Yeah, you should be really afraid of a cashless society. One, a record is left behind or on a database of the company that you do business with. You don't think, I'm told that you're supposed to keep records at least for 10 years in some places after you've done something. Then this is a way to predict future events. You know something? We say, but how do people know to do that? They take the information that you've given them and make the predictions accordingly. So that what you are doing is being watched, brethren. What we are doing is being watched. I don't think it's being watched to be your friend. You're watched to see how they could trap us in actual fact. So that this cashless society is a smart society move as well. And then it allows tracking by corporations and government. That's the next thing. If you don't have cash, the government can't tell you how much money you spend in buying whatever. But once you have that little whatever fed into the central bank, everything is known about you and what you buy. And they track you. So that when in 1948, George Orwell wrote that novel, Big Brother is Watching You, referring to 1984, he wasn't far off. You know that novel? Anybody know that novel? Yeah. We're showing how, in actual fact, there are going to be people watching you. And let me tell you something. We have smart televisions. I even told that even when your television is torn off, quote unquote, it is still being, a monitor is still going on. You can imagine that. In your own house. If that is true, let me tell you something, brethren. Like some people say, get rid of it. But I am not postulating that for anybody. Everybody has to know for themselves. So that government is able to track. And then I said earlier, this becomes a problem for the poor, the disabled, and the elderly who rely on cash. You got a lot of older people who know nothing about their credit card and their debit card and so. And if they're caught in it, they can have go along with the soup. Except they're so grown in Christ that they'd rather die than get in the system. You can understand what I'm saying? And as we just run down quickly, and next thing, we just had an outage here of our electrical current. You know that knocked down almost everything, probably except the hospital where they were trying to get them back on a hurry and they have backup power and so on. But you know, lots of us were like fish out of water. And you can't make a payment? How you can make a payment and your whole place crash? How you gonna get your salary and your whole place crash? Do you understand how serious this matter of a cashless society and this agenda that is pouring into that direction is? Now, cash transaction can continue with minimal infrastructural interference. So if I got my cash, I can still pay and get something. But if I use a card and it depends on electronics, I can't do nothing. I might not even flip my card, that may be empty if you don't have that. You may have one part alongside the road. Got the money, you cash to put in for you to put gas in your car. But then this one is, it allows central government to enforce a financial transaction on every person. So that if you got a $5 transaction, a tax on that. You understand what I just said? You ain't getting away because we got it trapped, man. We got it down trapped because that particular medium, that card will hold everything. And now I'm told, or matter of fact, I was experimental with my card in the countries that I came from. I wanted to see if it was recognized and whatever. And people take it and look at it. Everything. Or it is bona fide, and you can travel with it through the Caribbean. I know for sure. I travel on my ID card to St. Lucia, to Trinidad, from Trinidad to Tobago. I just draw ID card because I want to see what if it has this kind of thing at power people talking about. And one young lady in Trinidad saying, wow, Barbados gone ahead and left me. I saying to myself, she didn't know that. She may have been better off than Barbados. Yeah, the woman said that. Brother Saul was there, if you remember. No, sorry, it was myself and Bishop going to Tobago. So what I'm saying, brethren, we are in dicey waters, and as we conclude, next couple of minutes, it means that government can conduct more restrictive surveillance. So the policemen don't have to come out there and stop you and see if you got insurance or anything like that. You don't know, Mike. You don't have to do that anymore. Once you pass on the things there and to get that whatever, you know you're good enough. They can come for you one time. You see the kind of way, brethren? Do you have a license? Do you have insurance? All those kind of things? You guys don't have to run behind you anymore. Even in states, as you know, when you, police might stop you, ask you or whatever, you see man take out a little handheld device and push it in, and can tell you whether or not your license, your car insurance is paid and everything like it. So there's a lot of paper issues they're done with, although it's suspect they can crash easy. And then I said, certain people can be prevented from buying or selling. Yeah, it can prevent you from buying or selling. And that is the end of that one. So what I'm saying, brethren, is this agenda, law into Laudato Si, is a recipe for God's people to be squeezed, to give in, or to accept death and disgrace. Is our choice. Thank you much. I don't know if the last question, go ahead quickly, or comment.
I just want to bring this up before I forget, because we are indeed in a very critical time, and we need to be more observant concerning the signs of the times, especially. And I wanted to share this quick thought here in between. And of course, Satan himself, of course, who's the author of confusion, is seeking many different avenues to bring about his agenda. He doesn't care, who survives, who doesn't survive. Page 589, Great Controversy, you can see that Satan would like to wipe out everyone, including God's servants. But what I'm trying to say here is this. In America, we got something called, what you were showing there, 15-minute zones, right, that they will kind of like control you better in these zones that they have created already. Scotland has it, parts of America, England, whatever, Canada. But man, I see these things as not only to control the people, is to be able to monitor God's loud cry servants. They're the ones Satan is interested in. He's trying to stop them from advancing in giving. That's why we, at a time like this, we have to be trained and training ourselves too, how to give that loud cry. Because really and truly, the bottom line is this, right? Whatever we do in the name of God, we would be allowing our light to so shine. Now, there's also something called police your neighbor. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Police your neighbor. Neighbors will be involved in
as
exposing
informants.
Your neighbors. But so there's nothing we can do. We can't go and hide in some remote area. You've got a lot to give. So we have to know how to live in such circumstances that we're in. And what is coming, of course, will be a very trying. Many will give in. But I'm saying it will be very trying for everyone. And that is the reason why we have to stay focused on what God has called us to do. And become more enlightened, educated in this third angel message, that God can use us more effectively. God want to wrap up this work, and Satan is dragging things on, of course, too, but to a certain point. But his agenda, don't forget, Satan is the author of confusion. So when it all boils down, it will be one grand stalemate or whatever. So, but that is the objective, to get rid of God's people. Those who have these sealing truths, if he can block them, slow them down, stop them, whatever it takes, he will do. So these 50-minute zones I see is also part of that agenda for Satan to control, but also to expose and to monitor and to block. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Rudy. And like I said, it came a little burden on my heart that I think that having a degree of knowledge should share with our brethren, not look like anybody, but to alert us, brethren, to where we seem to be at this very crucial and critical juncture. So our time is there. I stop, obviously. Let us pray. Our Father, we come to thee to say thanks to you because you have not left us in ignorance. You've told us that we ought to be aware of the enemy's devices, even as we submit our wills to you and focus our attention on you, so that truly, dear Lord, we will not be caught off guard by his nefarious schemes. Be with us as your people. May your word be truly a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And may we not be superficial studiers of your word, but may we dig deep as for hidden treasure. Thank you that Jesus has made all of this available to us, that we don't have to be tricked or duped by the enemy, but we can be victorious over him at every stage. We thank you for your presence, through your spirit being with us and your holy angels. In your son's name we pray with thanksgiving. Amen. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.